Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This audio uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today we're diving into Malcolm Gladwell's Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking.
Oh, a fascinating choice.
It really explores this whole world of snap judgments and the unconscious mind, and how it shapes our decisions, in everything from personal relationships to those big career moves.
It's amazing how much goes on under the surface. We're not even aware of it half the time.
Exactly. And that's what Gladwell calls the adaptive unconscious, right? This hidden part of our minds that's constantly processing information, picking up on cues, making these split-second judgments.
Yeah. He dives into thin slicing, which is basically how our unconscious minds can sift through so much data and zero in on patterns and then, make judgments. Surprisingly accurate judgments a lot of the time, even with very limited information.
Like in that Iowa gambling experiment. I was fascinated by that. Participants were drawn to the safer decks of cards long before they could even explain why.
Right. Like their bodies knew before their minds did. They actually had physical responses. Their palms would sweat more when they reached for the riskier decks. Isn't that wild?
It is wild. It's like having a sixth sense. But then how much control do we really have? If so much is happening beneath our awareness.
Well, that's what Gladwell explores in The Locked Door. He's not shying away from the potential downsides of snap judgments. It's like our unconscious is this incredibly powerful tool, but it can also lead to some biases, some errors in judgment.
Like with the Warren Harding error, Harding was elected president based on his image. He just looked the part,
Totally. But licks can be deceiving.
Big time. But Gladwell digs even deeper. He shows how unconscious bias, often rooted in societal stereotypes, can impact things as big as hiring practices, even the criminal justice system.
Yeah, he has some unsettling examples, like how CEOs are disproportionately tall. It suggests this weird bias where we associate height with leadership.
Right, it's almost like a subconscious prejudice.
Yeah, and then there's that implicit association test, the IAT. Have you ever taken that?
I haven't.
It's eye-opening. It reveals these hidden biases we might not even know we have, about race, about gender, all sorts of things.
Wow, it makes you think, right?
Yeah.
It makes you want to examine your own potential biases. But then how do we reconcile that power of the unconscious with, the need for conscious awareness?
Well, Gladwell gets into the concept of expertise. He says experts are actually really good at thin slicing because their unconscious minds have been trained. They've been trained to recognize patterns, make accurate judgments based on years of experience in their field.
Makes sense, like an art expert who can spot a forgery in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Or a doctor who can just sense that something's off with a patient.
Exactly. He talks about John Gottman, this relationship expert who can predict divorce with incredible accuracy just by watching a couple interact for a few minutes. It's because his unconscious has become so attuned to these tiny, subtle cues that signal, harmony or discord in a relationship. So expertise isn't just about what you consciously know. It's about training your unconscious to be this master of pattern recognition in your area of expertise.
It's like developing a sixth sense for your field, seeing what others miss.
Exactly. And it's about cultivating this intuition that can guide your decisions when things get really complex.
So fascinating. And Gladwell doesn't stop there. He even explores mind reading, which of course isn't actually reading minds. It's about understanding people's thoughts and emotions through their facial expressions, their body language.
And that's where Paul Ekman's work on microexpressions comes in. These tiny, fleeting expressions that reveal our true emotions, even if we're trying to hide them.
Like a poker face that betrays what you're really thinking.
Exactly. And he even connects this to priming, the idea that our unconscious mind can be influenced, kind of subtly influenced by external stimuli. Like if you're exposed to positive images of a certain group of people,
it can actually reduce your implicit bias against them.
Pretty amazing, right? It shows how much our environment is shaping our unconscious thinking, even when we're not aware of it. It's powerful stuff. And these insights, they don't just apply to our personal lives, Gladwell takes us into these high-pressure fields like, medicine, law enforcement, where a split-second decision can have huge consequences.
I mean, just imagine the impact of unconscious bias on something as crucial as a medical diagnosis. That's a scary thought.
Right. And he talks about this idea of temporary autism. It's this state of heightened arousal that can actually lead to what he calls mind-reading failures, especially in high-stress situations.
Like when there's too much going on, too much to process.
Yeah, he uses the tragic example of the Amadou Diallo shooting, where police officers, under immense pressure, they mistook an innocent man for a suspect.
Awful. Just a horrible tragedy.
It highlights the need for what Gladwell calls white space, that mental breathing room, to process information properly, to make a more considered judgment.
So it's not just about individual bias. It's about how the situation itself can amplify those biases and lead to these terrible mistakes.
Exactly. And he suggests, creating more white space, slowing down the interaction, focusing on de-escalation techniques. These things can actually help professionals, make better decisions in those critical moments.
Gladwell also points out how small things, subtle cues, can have a big impact. Like, even a doctor's communication style can affect a patient's outcome.
He talks about the study where surgeons who had a warmer, more engaged way of communicating with patients were less likely to get sued for malpractice.
Wow. So bedside manner isn't just about being nice. It's really a critical part of effective healthcare.
Totally. It can actually impact someone's health.
It all comes back to this idea of blink, this balance between, trusting your intuition and knowing when to question it.
Understanding how your mind works, both the conscious and unconscious parts, so we can make better decisions, across the board. And Gladwell, he takes us to some pretty unexpected places to illustrate this.
Like improv comedy. That's a bit of a curveball. I mean, on the surface, improv seems like the opposite of calculated decision-making, right? It's all about spontaneity.
You'd think so, right? But Gladwell, he makes this really compelling case for how improv actually relies on a whole set of rules and structures that allow performers to think fast and creatively.
So it's not just chaos.
Not at all. He focuses on this improv group called Mother. They can create a whole hilarious 30-minute play, just from a single audience suggestion.
I mean, how is that even possible? It seems impossible.
It's amazing. But Gladwell argues that these improv performers, they've developed this incredible ability to thin slice.
Yeah.
To pick up on these subtle cues from their fellow actors, from the audience, and respond in a way that moves the scene forward.
So it's like they're in this constant state of blink.
They're masters of it. It's really about, being present, being super attuned, responsive to what's happening around them, trusting their intuition and embracing the unexpected.
That's a good life lesson in general, right? Just being present and trusting your gut.
Absolutely. But of course, we have to be mindful of, relying too heavily on intuition. There's a balance.
Gladwell definitely acknowledges that.
Yeah.
And he dives into the world of data-driven decision-making, especially in medicine. He contrasts the intuitive approach of those experienced doctors with the algorithms, the computer programs that are becoming more common in diagnosis.
It's kind of unsettling, to think that a computer could be better at diagnosing a heart attack than a doctor who's been doing this for years.
It feels counterintuitive. You want to trust human experience, especially when it comes to something so important.
He talks about this guy, Lee Goldman, who developed an algorithm for diagnosing heart attacks. And it actually turned out to be more accurate than the judgments of seasoned cardiologists.
Wow, so the data really backs it up.
It does. But then Gladwell also explores why doctors were so hesitant to use this tool, even though it seems superior.
I mean, I can understand that. It's like their years of training, their clinical intuition was being dismissed.
Exactly. And Gladwell brings up some important questions, like, can an algorithm really capture the nuances of, human health and disease? Are there aspects of patient care that require a human touch, a sense of empathy, that a computer just can't replicate?
I think that's something a lot of people worry about with AI in general.
It's a valid concern. And I think Gladwell is really advocating for this balanced approach, recognizing the power of data, but also valuing the wisdom that comes with experience and intuition.
Using both our heads and our hearts.
Exactly. Finding that sweet spot where data and intuition work together. It's about making the best possible decisions using all the tools we have.
That makes sense. We've been talking about the positive aspects of blink, but Gladwell also addresses the potential dangers of snap judgments, right? Especially when it comes to discrimination and injustice.
Yeah, it's like that Warren Harding error all over again. But this time, it's not just about bad presidents. It's about those unconscious preferences we have for certain types of people.
And how that can really impact our decisions in all areas of life.
Leading to discrimination in hiring, housing, education, even medical treatment. Gladwell cites this study where people were asked to, like, associate words and faces with categories like good and bad, and it turned out that most people had this strong unconscious bias towards white faces.
That's disturbing, but not entirely surprising, sadly.
It's sobering, right?
Yeah.
It shows how deeply ingrained these biases can be and how they can operate without us even realizing it. But Gladwell's not just presenting this as some grim reality. He's saying that we have to challenge these biases, expose ourselves to different perspectives, create systems and structures that, actually promote fairness and equality.
So it's a call to action, to be more mindful of our biases, both personally and as a society.
Exactly. To work toward a more just world, to understand that our snap judgments can have real consequences, and it's our responsibility to use them wisely. And he reminds us that we're not powerless against these biases. We can train our blink to be more accurate, less susceptible to prejudice.
But how do we do that? How do we rewire those unconscious patterns of thinking?
It takes effort. But Gladwell suggests that by practicing mindfulness, by exposing ourselves to diverse perspectives, by consciously challenging our assumptions, we can start to shift those ingrained patterns. It is not a quick fix, but it's hopeful,
We have the power to change.
We do. Blink is this incredible exploration of the unconscious mind. It's challenging, it's thought-provoking. It really encourages us to rethink how we make decisions, how we see the world, how we treat each other.
To become more mindful, more equitable, more in control of our own blink.
And even though our snap judgments can sometimes lead us astray, they're also, a part of what makes us human.
They help us navigate this complex world, connect with others, make decisions under pressure. It's about appreciating the power of intuition, but also being aware of its limitations.
Exactly. Our unconscious minds can be a source of brilliance, but also bias. It's our responsibility to use them wisely. It's interesting. While Blink gets into these big ideas about bias and decision-making, Gladwell also uses these really simple examples to illustrate things. Like, he talks about something as basic as tasting jam.
Tasting jam.
Okay.
That's not what I expected.
Right. But it's fascinating. He describes this experiment where people were asked to, rank different jams based on how much they liked them.
Okay, so just a taste test.
Yeah, and the thing is, when they just went with their gut, their rankings were actually pretty close to what expert tasters thought.
So our intuition about taste isn't so bad after all.
Exactly. But here's the twist. When they were asked to, explain their rankings, to really think about it and articulate their reasons, their choices actually became less accurate.
So overthinking messed them up.
Kind of. It's like their intuition was more on point than their conscious analysis, especially with something as subjective as taste.
I guess you can't really explain why you like something. You just do.
Sometimes, but Gladwell argues that, experts, they have this deeper understanding of what makes something taste good. They've developed this whole vocabulary to describe the subtle differences, things most people don't even notice.
He uses those professional food tasters as an example.
Yeah, like Barbara Heyman and Gail Vance Seville. They can break down a food like an Oreo into 90 different attributes.
90? Seriously?
It's wild. They can talk about the crispiness, the slipperiness, all these nuances, and it's that expertise, that ability to articulate those unconscious perceptions that makes them so valuable in the food industry.
So it's not just about having a good sense of taste. It's about being able to explain it, to analyze it.
Exactly. And Gladwell suggests that this skill, being able to put those gut feelings into words, it's something we can all develop, even if we're not, professional food critics. It's about paying attention to those first impressions, questioning our assumptions, finding the words to describe those little things we often miss.
Becoming more aware of what shapes our judgments.
Right. It's a reminder that our blink can be honed. Through practice, through exposure, through being willing to really look deeper at our own perceptions, Blink is this amazing journey into the unconscious mind. It makes you rethink how you make decisions, how you see the world, how you interact with everyone around you.
It's about trusting your gut, but also knowing when to question it, being mindful, being more discerning.
And recognizing that while those snap judgments can sometimes trip us up, they're also a part of what makes us human.
They help us navigate this crazy world, connect with people, make decisions in the moment. It's really about appreciating that power of intuition, but also, keeping its limitations in mind.
Well said. Our unconscious minds can be a source of so much brilliance, but also bias. It's up to us to use them wisely.
Blink. The Power of Thinking Without Thinking. It's one of those books that really stays with you. It's thought-provoking. It's full of these great stories and insights that can help us all navigate life with a little more awareness, a little more understanding, and maybe even a little more trust in our own intuition. To explore this world of snap judgments, the power of thinking without thinking, pick up a copy of Blink. You can find a link in the show notes. And while you're there, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into these fascinating books and ideas. We'll continue to nourish your mind on the go.